Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off because today I'm going to review and page through Dungeons and Dragons, Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen from Wizards of the Coast. Does this tome mark the triumphant return of a legendary D&D setting? Or will you find this edition's version of Dragonlance to simply be a shadow of its former self? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang, and happy holidays. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host, here at the Gaming Gang channel. As mentioned in the open, today I am going to review and page through Dungeons & Dragons, Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen from Wizards of the Coast. This 224-page hardcover arrives in stores on December 6th, carries an MSRP of $49.95. Should mention there are actually 3 different covers for this adventure. We've got the standard cover that we're looking at right here. There's also the friendly local game store edition that you can pick up at a gaming retailer. And then there's also a third, which is part of the deluxe edition, which I did a live unboxing of, which includes the book as well as a Dungeon Master's screen and the Warriors of Krynn board game. So if you watch my live unboxing, you know I've got 3 copies of this book. I certainly don't need all 3. So I revealed that I would be giving away my standard edition as well as my friendly local game store edition. And I'll be revealing the winners a bit later on in this video. So stay tuned. Swing on over to the other camera because here I've got Shadow of the Dragon Queen. A few things before we jump in. I do want to mention the fine folks over at Wizards of the Coast were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. These days, it's important you know that. I'll also be picture-in-picture up here, like I always am. So that means I'll be cutting off a little bit of the upper left portion of the book as we take a peek through. We're not going to look at each and every page, but I do want to give you a good feel for what's in this adventure and share my thoughts about it as well. Keep in mind, this is mainly an adventure. So as much as I'm going to try to stay away from major spoilers, there are going to be some spoilers. So if you are a player hoping that your Dungeon Master is going to run Shadow of the Dragon Queen, definitely recommend that you vamoose. All right, hopefully it's just Dungeon Masters and myself now. Let's jump on in. So we've got a lot of people who worked on this book. So the project lead was F. Wesley Schneider. Got a lot of writers, a lot of illustrators. If I started reading all their names, I would be here for about 10 minutes, and I guarantee I would probably butcher half of those names. But a lot of people worked together to bring Shadow of the Dragon Queen to you. So full disclosure, before I received this, I didn't know a whole lot about Dragonlance. You see, when the original came out, I had already moved on to what would eventually be decades of running Call of Cthulhu. So I wasn't playing D&D. I didn't read the novels. I didn't play the adventures. I didn't read the adventures. So, of course, over the years, I've heard things about Dragonlance. But all in all, I didn't know much about it. So the first section of this book is going to discuss the world of Krynn, which is where this takes place. But it's mainly going to focus on one continent of this world because that's where the adventure is going to take place. Now, the War of the Lances taking place as well, and the player characters are going to be involved in an adventure that is in one of the theaters of war. So we get a bit of the history of Krynn, the cataclysm that took place, and essentially the big selling point of Dragonlance. In fact, it was the selling point during the pitch the Hickmans made to TSR way back in the day, was dragons, and a lot of dragons. And I had to laugh because the response from TSR was, we've got a lot of dungeons, we don't have a lot of dragons. And thus, Dragonlance began over at TSR. So one aspect that we see in the 5e books as of late, and when I say as of late, I mean over the last few years, is we get little bite-sized chunks of information, but we never get a lot of detail. And that's unfortunate because this is a really popular setting, and people were clamoring for Dragonlance. And I'll be the first to admit, after reading through this adventure, I still don't know all that much about it. I still just have this kind of periphery understanding of the entire War of the Lance. And I got to be honest, I wish there were 20, 30 more pages in this book that was specifically dedicated to the background, the setting. I know some people refer to it as fluff, but I would feel far more confident in running this adventure and giving it a real Dragonlance feel. So one other aspect of this game world is the deities. The gods had kind of abandoned the world, but now they are making a return. At least some of them are making a return. Unfortunately, one of them is the big bad, the Dragon Queen herself. So she actually leads 5 different armies. And as I had mentioned, the player characters are going to be taking part in an adventure that takes place in one theater, and they are actually going to go up against the Red Dragon army. So we get a section here that talks about the various different species, the races on Krynn. We get our traditional fantasy races and how they work in this setting. They're not just the usual, we're just dropping in Forgotten Realms elves. So there is quite a bit of difference. There are some popular races that are not present on Krynn. Now, one of the big selling points that people are talking about is the ability for players to play as Kinder. And I do understand in the novels, there are some major characters who are Kinder and very popular characters as well. Once again, wish there was more content about these people. So pretty much in a nutshell, they are small. They're about the size of gnomes, but they are proportioned like humans. They also have pointed ears, and they are very curious and fearless. Those are like their 2 main selling points. So we do get some special abilities that they've got, some ability score changes too. But once again, I would like to have read, like 2-3 pages about these people and their heroes and things like that. Unfortunately, it's not present. We do have the Mages of High Society, and we also have this Brotherhood of Knights, which nobody's too sure if they're good or bad anymore. Player characters are going to find out. It is the Solamnia, the Knights of Solamnia, and we have the Mages of High Sorcery. So these are new backgrounds. And during the adventure, the players can actually become Solamnia Knights and Mages of High Society. We also have some new magic. We have a new type of magic. We have lunar sorcery. Once again, just a few paragraphs and a few different spells. So I don't know if Wizards of the Coast is locked into this 224 page count, because it seems like that's the limit to their hardcovers as of late. I wish there was maybe, like I said, 20 or 30 more pages of background and character options and a little more magic and so on. Thankfully, there's a pretty good adventure that's included in Shadow of the Dragon Queen. That is a saving grace here. It's not a fantastic adventure. It's not the best 5e adventure, in my opinion, but it's pretty good. And it's a bit different. It's not the same old, same old. So the adventure itself, as I mentioned, is going to pit the player characters up against the Red Dragon army. Not the entire army, but elements of it. So it's going to start off kind of interestingly enough with the player characters are attending the funeral of a friend, and the player characters don't know each other. And what I would probably recommend when you're running this would be, if possible, don't have the player characters traveling together to the funeral, to this village the funeral is going to be held in. And if possible, run the encounters that are included in kind of the prelude separately for them. Because there are 3 different encounters, and it's more along the lines of what sort of character classes they are, which of these encounters is going to take place. One of them I thought was really cool. It's essentially for your magic users. The martial characters encounter is okay. It's kind of later on in the adventure, not too far down the road, but later on in the adventure, it kind of becomes important what that encounter was, but not as much, in my opinion, as the magic users. So the player characters find themselves in this village and they're getting to know people. They're learning about the movers and shakers and getting allies and possibly enemies. And remember, this is taking place during the War of the Lance. And the war has actually been going on for about 5 years. And there are rumors of warfare, battles taking place faraway lands, though. It has not come into the backyard of the player characters and these NPCs until this adventure. So one aspect early on, and this is something we see in 5e adventures all the time, and other role-playing games, I don't want to just pick on 5e, but suddenly the player characters are kind of like put in command of the defense of this village and put in charge of evacuating the villagers and things like that. And it's kind of like, but they just showed up a couple days ago. It's like, what about the mayor? What about the people who live here? And I know, I get it. It just doesn't feel logical, is what I'm saying. So what happens is a vanguard of the Red Dragon army shows up. And of course, the player characters in the village aren't going to be able to fight these soldiers, humans, and draconians, which is another new species that we have in the bestiary in the back. And of course, there has been a betrayal so that the actual militia of the village itself has almost essentially been wiped out. So what'll happen is player characters are going to try to defend the village, but they're going to need to evacuate the villagers as well because they're up against an army, and you're looking at these are, 2nd and 3rd level characters. So they're going to make their way down to the city of Kalaman, and they're going to actually kind of pledge themselves to the defense of this city. So they're going to go out on various different missions. They're trying to learn more about the Red Dragon army because this is all new to them. They've not been battling the Red Dragon Army, they have pretty much been at peace for some time. So we've got a variety of different missions that are pretty cool. One thing that I do want to mention that takes place a little too often is the player characters find out either someone is not who they say they are or what they say they are, or there's a betrayal. And in my opinion, I think that the designers went to the well a little too often on that. And then there's also the option of having other NPCs betray your players. And personally, in my opinion, I would not go down that road, because at least with my players, my gang, once, cool, twice, that's cool. The fifth time, it'd be like, what the hell's going on here? So, should also mention that the Warriors of Krynn board game can be incorporated into Shadow of the Dragon Queen as well. I have read through the rule book. I have kind of poked around with the game. I have not actually sat down with the gang and played it. But I will say, I think most players will enjoy not incorporating the board game. I know, part of a deluxe edition, they come together. But the thing is, there's various different battles that take place of various different sizes throughout this adventure. And it's going to kind of break the immersion if it's suddenly like, okay, well, all right, let's put everything away. Let's pull the board game out, set everything up. And there are actually various different events and encounters and things like that that take place during these battles that won't take place if you're actually simulating them with Warriors of Krynn. So I'm sure there will be plenty of folks out there who enjoy incorporating the board game with this adventure. I just think, I don't know. I don't play with your gamers, right? I'm not with your table, but based on my experience, I think the players would be better served just by role playing through. Once again, just my opinion. So what eventually happens is the player characters learn that the Red Dragon Army and Lord Soth, yes, Lord Soth, makes an appearance in a couple of chapters of this adventure. So start getting ready to channel your best James Earl Jones, Darth Vader kind of vibe going. The player characters learn that the Red Dragon Army is trying to find this lost city so they can acquire this weapon. And of course, the player characters are going to attempt to get to that lost city first. This is actually my favorite chapter of the adventure because it's not as on rails as the rest of the adventure. Got a bit of a hex crawl vibe to it. And we've got a lot of stuff going on. Now, once the player characters do reach this lost city, I found that to be pretty interesting as well. I will point out that, as I just mentioned, Lord Soth is in this adventure. And I know a lot of people are super excited about that. It's not like the player characters are going to go head to head with him, though. They're going to encounter him a few times, but it's going to almost be like Darth Vader in the first hour of Empire Strikes Back. So what eventually is going to happen is the player characters are going to thwart the Red Dragon Army at the City of Lost Names. And they might think, hey, we've done it, only to learn they haven't quite done it. So they're going to have to return to Kalaman to assist the city during the siege. And they have to go to a location. Once again, I'm trying to stay as spoiler-free as I possibly can, although some of the artwork is giving things away. But they're going to have to go to a location, big battle. They're going to confront the big bad, who actually is not Lord Soth. And it's not the Dragon Queen either, but a pretty good big bad. And then hopefully the player characters are successful and save the day. I should point out that I really like the fact that this adventure is taking place during the War of the Lance, but it's kind of like a side campaign. Because one of the problems that I had always heard from players who had played through Dragonlance adventures was that because they were taking place in the timeline of the novels, that the player characters always were kind of like the B story. And in a role-playing game, your players should never be kind of like this week's guest stars, right? They should always be the big stars, the headliners, the names on the top of the marquee. So I like the fact that that is what goes on in this adventure. So we have some new magic items. We have a bit of a bestiary. We've got some of the important NPCs. And yes, so there's our big bad right here. We do have our stat block for Lord Soth. So have no fear. We've got that. We also have sidekicks. So this adventure is designed to be played by between 4 and 6 players, which nowadays 6 players is kind of asking a lot. I always laugh looking back at some of the old Advanced Dungeons and Dragons adventures, and it's like, for 8 to 10 characters, levels 4 to 6. It's like, yeah, like you're going to get 10 people. We couldn't, pretty hard to get 10 people back then. Good luck trying to get 10 people now. So we do have some sidekicks. Once again, I would definitely recommend, if the Dungeon Master is going to utilize the sidekicks, use them as sidekicks. Do not steal the spotlight, steal the thunder from your player characters. We wrap up with a cool poster map of the continent. This is only single-sided. There's nothing on the back of it. And essentially, it's a big poster map of this. And that is a look through Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen for Dungeons and Dragons. Swing on over to the other camera. Before I provide my final thoughts and review score, let me announce the winners of my 2 copies of Shadow of the Dragon Queen. So the winner of the standard edition is Scott Mayer or Scott Meyer. And the winner of the alternate Friendly Local Game Store edition is Betty Boopstar. Betty Boopster. So each of you, please send an email to Jeff McAleer at thegaminggang.com from the email address that is associated with your YouTube account. And I will get your address and start sending these out for you to enjoy. All right, and congratulations. And for those of you who took part in the contest, thank you very much. Keep in mind, I almost always do this with the newest D&D releases. When they have an alternate art cover, I give away the alternate art cover. So this time, just happen to have 3 books. Figured I'd keep the deluxe edition because it goes with the Warriors of Krynn. So I figured I'd give away the other 2 copies. All right. So let's talk about Shadow of the Dragon Queen. As I already pointed out, I really do wish that there was maybe 20, 30 pages of different setting information included in the book. Because even after finishing reading through this, in fact, I read through some parts twice, I still don't have that great a grasp on the Dragonlance setting. And I can't tell you why it's so popular and why people were clamoring for a return outside of possibly nostalgia. So 20 or 30 pages more of that would have been a godsend for this and would have bumped the review score up by a little bit as well. So there is that. The adventure is good. It's interesting. It's different. Yes, we've had the big bads trying to get a weapon and you got to stop them adventures for years. There's 1,000 of those out there. Thankfully, the weapon's a bit different. There's a bit of a different take on this. So I thought that was pretty cool as well. It is a 5e adventure, so it is on rails. No getting around that. I'm not going to harp on that. But yeah, there's not a lot of open-endedness to this. It's pretty much A to B, B to C, C to D, and so forth. But that's how 5e D&D is. So get used to it. I know a lot of folks out there, and I have an old school mentality myself. I know a lot of people who are into the OSR kind of get aggravated by these plot-driven adventures and that. But I mean, the reality is most people who are really into the OSR aren't playing 5e D&D anyway. So there's a lot going on. As I mentioned, I think the chapter where it's the search for the lost city is my favorite. One thing I would recommend Dungeon Masters out there do before running Shadow of the Dragon Queen is rewatch some medieval fantasy movies or even historical movies that have battle scenes and crib from them. Because I would definitely recommend, you don't have to make this grim, but you should make this gritty because there is a war taking place. So you want to drive that home. And the more you drive that home, the more epic you will make this adventure for your players. You can make this stand out like something they have never played before. You really, really can. So I would definitely recommend rewatch battle scenes from Game of Thrones or Henry V with Kenneth Branagh. That has a fantastic Battle of Agincourt. And that scene is about 20 minutes long, but it really gives you the feel of this is what combat was like. So I would definitely recommend that. There is a movie called Flesh and Blood, which I want to say, I think it was Dr. Howard's first English language movie. There's some good siege scenes. There's some good fight scenes in that as well. Do not watch that movie with the kids. I'm going to throw that out there right now. Don't watch that movie with the kids in the room. But that I would definitely watch, even watch, Saving Private Ryan, just to draw inspiration for especially the battle encounters. I think it will go a long, long way. I'll also mention, don't be afraid to kill off player characters. I know there are a lot of dungeon masters out there who are real squeamish about doing that. And yes, I get it. Your players invest a lot of time and energy into creating their player characters. But once again, this is war. And this is not a high magic, everybody gets resurrected sort of setting either. So you can really drive things home if you don't fudge the dice. If one of your characters is going to take a dirt nap, then that character is going to take a dirt nap. Don't bail them out. So just a few little tips I would throw out there. Anyway, wish there was more setting information, player options, a bit more about the world of Krynn in Shadow of the Dragon Queen. But it's a pretty darn good adventure. So on a scale of 0 to 10, I give Dungeons & Dragons Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen, an 8 out of 10. Certainly earns a recommendation from me. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. If you do subscribe, ding that bell. It'll not only let you know when I upload videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. Central, right here on YouTube. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy life to watch this review. And until I see you next time, here's hoping each and every one of you gets to enjoy plenty of great gaming. Your gang. Oh, hey, you're still here. That's okay. You don't have to leave just yet. In fact, why don't you subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel right here, or take a peek at the latest live stream, or even find out what YouTube recommends you check out from the channel. And of course, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thanks again for watching.